Hi there, and welcome. This is Melissa Tebow with the School of Science and Mathematics Distance Education, and my colleague Cora Wiley, our biology instructor. And we're going to start with a little housekeeping. Everybody's up and running and can hear us well?
Yes.
All right, thank you. We have handouts for this session. Those handouts are posted online, and you don't necessarily need to have them in your hand, but just know that whatever you need is available both through, you can always contact us through email, but the handouts are available at the distance learning site, STEM workshops site, where you will find the archive of this presentation. So you can watch the archive of the presentation, and you can also access the handouts there. And if you have any problems with that, you can get up with us and we will point you in the right direction. I am a media specialist here, and so I've done some of the background work, but Cora is our biology instructor. She's done the majority of the teaching that will be demonstrated. And just so that we understand, folks that we're talking to, you folks are in high school settings or elementary settings?
High school.
High school here.
High school?
Elementary.
Okay. And so we encourage you to chime in, interrupt, gesticulate, get our attention. We are accustomed to being interrupted because we do teach, and so feel free to ask your questions as we go along. And is there anything that anybody needs to talk about as far as what your expectations are for the session ahead of time, so we make sure that we address that as we're working?
Not particularly.
Just along for the ride, huh?
Kind of, sort of.
Awesome. Okay. All right, thank you. We're going to switch into Cora's presentation, and we'll get started.
All right, well, hello, and again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to give your attention to us, and hopefully we can share something that will help make your jobs and what you're doing in your setting a whole lot easier and more enjoyable all around. So the title of the seminar or talk, or whatever you want to call it, is Using Technology to Assess Student Understanding. So I think before going into this very much further, we need to have an understanding of what we mean by technology. And so I decided to kind of take a broader definition of that and define that as the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes. And the reason I want to do that is because I think the very first thing that needs to happen in a classroom setting is taking advantage of this scientific fact that emotional climate impacts learning and memory. So one of the primary objectives in the classroom is to help foster student learning so that they can remember what it is that they've been exposed to. So the emotional climate is really, really important for that. And so one of the things that I've found in working with the students here at Science and Math is that there is a very strong sense of judgment that I don't necessarily want to offer my idea because it may be wrong. Now, that might be judgment that they're placing on themselves or perceived judgment, but nonetheless, if they have that feeling, that's going to block their ability to take in anything. For me, the instructor, to find out what they do know. There's nothing worse than asking the question and it falling on silence and no one's willing to share, particularly when you know that some of the students just don't understand. So I think it's really important from the beginning to make sure that the emotional climate is such that it's going to help with all of what's going to come later. So one of the techniques that I use that takes advantage of digital software and electronic resources is using the opportunity of the software like Google Docs to allow the students to share very freely, openly and collaboratively, but within the confines of their laptop. So as they're sitting at their desk, I might have a Google Doc that they can all contribute to and just pose the question, what's your prior experience to this topic? What do you know already about this topic? So the goal of this is for me to find out, well, what are they bringing to the table? And then it's also an opportunity for me to see what misconceptions are they bringing to the table, because it's going to be my task to try to correct some of those misconceptions by the time we get to the end of the unit or topic or whatever it might be. And then thirdly, it's going to be important for me to gain insight into the individual student style of learning and how they have engaged material in the past. So this is the process, so you can see here. Can everyone see this PowerPoint well?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Great. So again, having the students share whatever facts and details they might know, trivia, tricks if it's a math context, personal experiences they might have with the subject, or any curiosities that they might have. I've always wondered why such and such and such. So one topic, to give you an example, that we were studying was sleep and memory and the relationship between the two. It was a very hot topic because sleep is a prized commodity here at Science and Math, being a residential high school environment where there's always the challenge between homework or video games. And so I think managing sleep and how to create an environment where you can maximize your memory is important. So we were discussing sleep and memory and the importance of sleep. And so to introduce that topic, I opened up a Google Doc that they could add to, and I'll blow this up so you can see it a little bit more clearly. Let's go a little bit more than that. All right, that should be big enough. Okay.
Stephen, one. See.
So I'll just scroll, maybe if I do 400, that might work. So they said, if I study information before going to sleep, I always remember it in the morning. So that was just something that they shared, their own personal experience with sleep and memory. Another student said that if I often get the sensation that I'm falling asleep or tripping when I'm drifting off to sleep. So this is something that they observed, and they didn't really have an understanding of why that was. So that's a cue to me that might be a point of discussion that we can have, and something that I can explain as we continue in the discussion. So another one was, my roommate jerks when she's falling asleep. So again, personal experiences. And then the next one, when I was younger, I could sleep through any noise, storm, lights, etc. So from their experiences, from their prior understanding of sleep, I can now have a better sense of the experiences and the content and the information that they're bringing to the discussion. And then I can make points from that later on as I see fit. So after this time of sharing, I use Google Docs as the forum. You might choose another forum. So there are lots of web-based software that allow for real-time input that you can use. And the ultimate goal of that at the end is to try to take what they're bringing, their experiences, their information, and connect it to the instructional content. And that's important because that helps to establish the relevancy. One of the other scientific research discoveries that they've realized is that the more connections, new information can be made to information that's already there, the stronger the memory foundation is going to be for that new bit of information. So the more you can connect this new information with old information and previous experiences, the more they're going to be likely to remember that. And so then it's also an opportunity for me to take note of their learning styles. So if a student has shared, oh, I read this book that talked all about sleep and I was really intrigued, and so then I did this research paper on it, and so now I know XYZ about sleep. Well, that cues me into, okay, so they can get their information, or perhaps prefer to get their information by reading or personal investigation and study. So I can take that into consideration in project assignments or homework assignments or whatever, having individual projects. Alternatively, a student might say, well, I observed my roommate when they were falling asleep, and they jerked as they were falling asleep and drifting off. So then I might make an assignment, okay, well, make observations of your siblings or your roommates or whoever over the course of this week as it relates to them in sleep. So for them, it might be a more personal, like what's happening in my life, as opposed to what's happened, the information that might be in a textbook. So all of that information you get up front, and it helps to inform the instructional portion of the topic or unit or whatever that you're in. Questions, feel free to jump in if I need to clarify, if you have questions or comments, definitely feel free.
And just so you know, folks that are watching this through the stream, you can ask questions on chat, and I will ask those questions out loud. So we also can field questions on the chat on the live stream.
All right, so additionally, what can come out of the input that the students are giving? For instance, if I'm asking them about their curiosities, there was one class where we were discussing the skin and the structure and anatomy of the skin. And so I just asked them, what are some questions that you've always wanted to know about skin or anything related to skin? And so they generated a fairly substantial list of questions. And instead of me taking on the task of answering those questions, I put it back on them to say, okay, well, these are the questions that came up in this group. So let's divide up these questions and have you all investigate the answers. So I set it up to where the students did not answer the question that they asked. Instead, someone else would answer that. And at the end, they would all have the answer to the question and would all be enriched by it. So I sent them out, and what they came back with was rather interesting. So I'll just show you an example and then point out some neat aspects of this. I must caution you though. I teach anatomy and physiology, and so this is the high school, and the questions were anatomy, physiology related at the high school level. So beware.
Ever wondered what your nipple skin is made out of? Nipple skin is a phenomenon that has wondered upon for many, many years, especially by some person in our anatomy and physiology class.
You probably have received a cut or an injury at some point during your life. In fact, this is such a common occurrence for most people, they stop thinking entirely about the processes behind the cut and how it repairs itself. But these are very important questions nonetheless.
The little spots that we call freckles are actually clusters of melanin. Melanin is a pigment that causes coloration in our skin. Have jibber jabber. So what happens if you already have freckles? What do? Well, luckily I have a special line of products to prevent your freckles. Unveiling super duper sunscreen.
Sunscreen!
Bleaching cream.
Bleaching cream!
Chemical strips.
Me?
Yes!
Chemical peel!
Wide brim hats.
Wide brim.
Okay. So that's what they came back with. And what that did was they did a good job. The information was correct. So they actually went out, they got the research, but then they put it in their own style. They made it personal, they made it relevant. In the first little clip that you saw with the young lady with the really thick goggle glasses, she was actually really apprehensive about taking on that question. Remember, these were randomly assigned, or somewhat randomly assigned. And so she was nervous, but she owned it. She got some really, really good information. I actually learned some stuff from what she investigated. And she was able to put it in a format that was awkward, but it was intentionally awkward to kind of diffuse some of the awkwardness, and it worked. And so I think having the students use the technology that they're familiar with to take the information that they have investigated, putting those two things together really makes their understanding more solid. And it gives me an opportunity to see not only what is their own personal style and how they like to engage in the content, but then also how are they understanding the information? Did they really understand how freckles are formed? And I can see that in their explanations and how they choose to portray that information. So I think that's really important, and it comes all from having them express what interests them, and then I use that as a way to engage the content. Questions before I go on? Yeah. All right. So that's all kind of leading up to the instruction, lecture, whatever the bulk part of the content delivery is going to be. So one of the prerequisites in going into the content material is knowing up front what is it that you want the students to walk away from. When we finish the unit, when you finish the topic, or they finish the course, what do they need to be able to do? And having that perspective of starting with that up front will help create a more dynamic process that you can make the necessary adjustments, because you know where you want the students to get, and as they reveal certain things throughout, you can help navigate them to that particular point. And then also knowing to help create a more dynamic and fluid transition from point to point, knowing what are the major points that you want to get across, and then what are the points that if they're brought up, that's great, but if they're not, it's okay if they're left out. That's really important, because as students are expressing what it is that they know, how they're understanding the material, making those kind of game time adjustments are going to be necessary. And if when you have a clear understanding of they need to know this point and this point is helpful, because going in between there, you can take a number of different paths, but as long as they get XYZ point, they'll be okay. Because knowing XYZ will allow them to do whatever it is that you've identified that they need to be able to do. And so those might be going back to the essential skills, or the Common Core, or state standards, whatever it might be. You know what your foundation is going to be. So going into the instructional portion is going to be a lot easier when you have that understanding. So the goal is to challenge and then correct any misconceptions that the students might have. In the sharing part, kind of the before the instruction, they were sharing what they know. And some of what they know might have been wrong, but that wasn't the time to correct it. Because again, wanting to create a judgment-free zone and create an atmosphere where it's okay to share your ideas. But at this point, during the instruction time, this is the time to challenge those ideas or challenge those misconceptions, and then seek to correct those misconceptions. And then also, this is the time to solidify and establish the connections between the facts and details of the concepts that are making up the topic. So making sure that they have a thorough understanding, and not just I know fact A and I know fact B, but I know the connection between A and B, and how A and B might relate to C. So whatever course or content that you're going to be teaching, you can make those decisions about the necessary links that need to be made. So one thing that is helpful for me during this process, when I'm giving instruction or I'm presenting content, I want to know right then, do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? So I don't want to wait until the end, the student take a test, and then I realize they didn't understand anything. That's too late. I want to know real time as I'm presenting, do you understand? And so I've found that, again, this is in the Google Doc format, there's called a feedback form. And it's a form that's really easy to create. This is just a screenshot of it. And so it takes maybe 30 seconds to create a form. And so you would add an item and the title of whatever question that you're wanting to have them answer, the type, the format of the question. So are they going to respond in a paragraph, or is this going to be multiple choice, true, false? So you can make those details there. And so this is an example of a form that I made where, I don't know if you can see that, but it says, what are the 3 layers of filtration in the glomerulus? We were talking about the kidney and how our body makes urine. And so this was an important point that I needed them to understand, and I wanted to make sure that they got these 3 layers, because it was going to be foundational for what we're going to do in the future. So I created this feedback form and then made it available to them. And so this is the data that comes back to me. And it creates a timestamp. And then also the questions that I've asked. So there were 6 questions that I asked, and they offered the answers to those questions. And so it just comes up in an Excel type document, one after another, real time, as they're answering the questions. And so I can very quickly scan and see how many of them really understand this. Does anyone understand? Did anyone get the right answer? Which questions do they understand? Which do they not? So it's really quick, it's really easy, and it's something that gives immediate feedback so that you know, should you move on, or do you need to camp out a little while and elaborate on some topics?
Question, so is this an anonymous form?
Yeah, so the way I had it set up is that it is anonymous. And the reason that I like the anonymity is because, again, going back to that judgment-free zone, when students are, when you ask the question, do you understand what we've just been talking about? And you may ask for a show of hands. You might give it a brave soul that'll raise their hand if they don't understand. Most often, maybe your experience is different. The ones that don't understand won't say anything, and they'll just be silent, and they will sit back and allow things to continue without saying anything. So they're not wanting their identity to be revealed because they don't understand. And who wants to admit in public, you don't understand? So I like the anonymity. And so this format does not have any student information. It's just their answers. And the only information is when they answered it. So that's it. There is an option that you can create a question that asks them to put in their name or some identifying characteristic, and you can get something that's not anonymous. So it's up to you, and it's based on, I think, the setting, the dynamics in the classroom. I prefer to keep it anonymous.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, one of the other things that as we're going on, and I'm checking to see, do you understand, I want to make sure that I am hitting all of the Bloom's taxonomy levels. Are you all familiar with Bloom's taxonomy?
Yep.
Okay, great. So with the first level of just knowledge, the facts and details, can you remember? That's important. The next level being understanding, and I have that identified as this little knot tied around a finger. So can we remember? Can we organize? And so creating opportunities for students to not just give back the information, but now take it to the next level and now organize the information. And so there are a lot of different technologies that can be used for that. The one that I've used and really like is FreeMind, and it's mind mapping. So are you all familiar with mind mapping? Very similar to concept mapping.
And this is is one of the tools that is on the handout. And so anything we refer to is on the handout. You'll see the links to the free tools and annotations about those tools listed on the handouts when you get to that point and you're looking for it. So,
yeah. So FreeMind is a great way for the students to take the facts and details and then make the connections. And show the relationship between one topic or one fact and another, or one concept to another. So that's what I currently am using and what the students seem to really like for organizing the information. Another thing that I like to do is have the students create analogies and stories. I'll elaborate on that in a bit, but what it does is it really helps the students to think outside of how it was presented to them and how they can take ownership of the material and perhaps present it to someone else in a different format and not just have it be regurgitation. Also having the students to explore the connections between what you're talking about in your course and maybe something that they're learning in another course, or they've learned in the past, or something that they're experiencing in their life. So exploring the various connections between what you're discussing and other things. And then also really thinking critically about examining and analyzing the topics. So I'll give an example of that as well. But as we go, we're working higher and higher on that Bloom's taxonomy. And so that we end up having the students evaluating and synthesizing. When they're looking at hot topics or current events, they can say, oh, well, here's a drug trial for a new sleep therapy or treatment. Based on what I know about sleep and how the brain works and how it's important for life, is this going to be a good drug to introduce into the market? Or is it not? And why? Based on the science that they know. So helping them to engage the world around them, I think, is also really important in helping them move further into or higher up on that Bloom's taxonomy. So I'll give some examples of what this looks like and how and the technology that can be used to help facilitate that. So the one is the analogies, using the analogies to illustrate concepts. So this is in my cell biology class, and I start the course with the chemistry and kind of laying the foundation of the chemistry of life. And so one of the things that I found is that when we got to the topic of electronegativity, and chemistry is a prerequisite for the course, they've all heard of electronegativity. They can give a textbook definition of electronegativity, but very, very few of them, maybe one in a whole class, could give a working definition and explain it in a way that someone else could really understand accurately what it's about. So I gave them the challenge to create an analogy to explain electronegativity. And so this is what they did.
Electronegativity is how badly an atom wants more electrons, essentially. So if I'm a hydrogen atom and Emily is an oxygen atom, then Emily wants electrons more than I do. And so she will take my electron and she will also form a bond that isn't exactly sharing in the middle. Like between us, they'll be more toward her, which is the definition of a polar bond. So if we were both hydrogens and we were connected together, we'd be right in the middle, and we would be non-polar. But since Emily is an oxygen and wants the electron a lot more, then it's still shared between us, but she gets it a lot more of the time than I do.
All right. So one of the requirements that I give to the students is that they can't use jargon. They can't use content-specific jargon. And the reason I create that rule is to force them to think about their understanding of the information and the concepts behind that, and to illustrate it without just repeating the terminology. And then capturing it on video is also helpful because it ups the ante a bit, because now they're on camera and they have to communicate it well, and they have to have an understanding very clearly and solidly in their mind. And so it kind of forces them to make sure that they really understand the information. And so we'll talk in a bit about the VoiceThread technology, which now allows students to have access to the video, and then other students can make comments on these explanations and get additional feedback. So I'll show you that now. So this is, again, a similar activity where I had students explaining these concepts with bonding and water, and they were given the task to now make comments on each other's videos. So we made this video in class, and then all of these are student comments. So I'll pause the video just because it's about 3 minutes long, and just go to some of the comments that the students made. So here's one comment that the student made about the analogy type explanations that I just showed you.
The explanation for melting was pretty good, although they didn't exactly mention why the atoms have to wiggle more. That's a result of the higher temperature, but I think they could have explained that or given an explicit description. The burning part, it would have been nice to know that the molecule being burned has to be a hydrocarbon because it's needed for combustion. And it's not just when after combustion is done, the products can't just be any new molecules. One is carbon dioxide and one is water. I don't think they ever said that explicitly. The ionic covalent bond group was pretty good, although it was really hard to hear, but it would have been nice if they explained that electronegativity depends on the effects of the positively charged nucleus. Although I guess that was more electrostatic attraction. But if they did say that, I couldn't hear, so. The next group, the valence electron group, was really good. There's not a whole lot I think they could have done to make it better. The solubility group could have done another example with a nonpolar because I think they just did sodium chloride. They could have chosen a non-polar substance to be dissolved. And then the last group, which was my group, also could have been a bit more specific. That was kind of sad, that was my group. But they could have been a little bit more explicit about what exactly was positive and negative, since we were doing it in terms of electrostatic attraction. So I don't think we said, like in the beginning with the ionic example, I don't think we said this one is positive and this one is negative, and that would have, I think, helped the explanation.
All right. So, let's see. Oops. Sorry about that. So that's an example of a video is put together. They create the analogy, demonstrate their understanding of the material, and then their peers are able to offer comments, or this worked really well, or I really understand this part of the analogy, but this part wasn't so clear, or this didn't seem quite accurate. And so they can get that feedback that helps correctly form the information in their minds, which is important because sometimes it's better to hear it from a peer than it is the teacher. And so this allows the students to engage in this process, this community process of refining each other's understanding. And I found that it's really helpful. And the test that we took on this material, a vast majority, 90+% of the students, when I posed the questions that they had to give analogies on, they were dead on in their understanding and accurate explanation in scientific terms. And so I think that was made possible by them working out those details in analogy form to make sure that they had those ideas crystallized in their minds. So the other thing that I have the students do is analyze and evaluate the hot topics. So this is pretty far down or far up on the Bloom's taxonomy, where they're evaluating, they're creating, they're synthesizing based on information and their understanding of material. So I told the students, after we had learned about the brain and how the brain works to control the muscles in the body, to find any topic, any research article, news article, a video that related to what we had discussed, and to evaluate whatever claims were being made in the video or article or whatever. And so this student did a presentation and video on, the title of the article was Monkey Think, Robot Do, where a monkey had its brain wired such that it was controlling a robot across the world. And so as this monkey was engaged in walking, the robot was following the same movements as the monkey. And so the student had the responsibility of explaining, okay, what's going on? Why is that possible based on what we've been talking about? And so I'll just show you a little bit of that video and my comment to her.
I feel like when the monkey was walking, the machine was walking too, using only the brain signals from the monkey. But when the monkey stopped walking, the machine kept walking, which means that some of the signals that they used to make the machine walk actually weren't a part of the monkey's walking, but maybe something that the monkey was thinking about as he or she was walking. They also...
Right, so then I offered a comment. So this was the video that she presented. I watched the video, and then through using the VoiceThread software, I was able to make comment on what the analysis and the evaluation that she made of this this article. And so you can make I'll read it out to you. You can make an audio comment. You can make a webcam comment. I chose to make just a text comment. just because I was complimenting her on what she had done. All right, so what that says is great critical thinking. I really like how you proposed an alternative explanation of the data instead of just accepting the explanation provided by the researchers. So she had given me the article. I looked at the article. I read the article. I saw her analysis of the article. And when she made the statement that when the monkey stopped walking, when the monkey stopped walking and the robot continued to walk, her explanation is that, well, they misinterpreted the signals that they were using to control the robot. Whereas the researchers interpreted that as proof that it was the monkey's brain power that was controlling the robot, as opposed to the monkey actually walking. So same data, different analysis. She went out on a limb, and I applauded and encouraged her for that, to come up with an alternative explanation for that, and not just accept what the researchers were proposing that result to be due to. So again, I was able to see from that her ability to think critically and on her own about the information in light of what we have been discussing in class. And so I think VoiceThread creates a great opportunity for you to see how the students are engaging the information and the connections and the sense that they're making of the data that they are evaluating. So next is a part of the instruction as they're moving through the Bloom's taxonomy levels, and you're seeing how they're understanding information, how they're reconciling differences and discrepancies. This is also an opportunity as the instructor to challenge any lingering misconceptions that they might have. So again, using VoiceThread, I was able to recognize that a student had a misunderstanding about intermolecular forces and why it is that when water freezes, it's less dense than when it's a liquid. And so she was giving an explanation, and I made this observation. So what I did was, instead of saying, no, you're wrong, that's not the reason why water is less dense when it's frozen, I challenged that misconception with a question. So her explanation was that, actually I think I have it, so let's just...
Okay, so water also has intermolecular...
Hey Hannah, excellent job explaining capillary action. That was spot on. So I have a question though about the less dense state of water when it's frozen. So if that decrease in density is due to the repulsion of the like charges, then what happens to that repulsion in the liquid state that would allow for water to be at a higher density and so closer together? So think about that and let me know what you think. All right, thanks. All right, so
okay, so pH scale.
Oh, wait. Sorry about that. I'll just go ahead and close that out. All right. So her explanation of why water is less dense at a solid is because when water freezes, it forms this crystalline structure and the like charges are repelling. And so, like I said, instead of correcting that on the spot in that comment, I am guiding her by questioning and a reflective questioning of, well, if that's true, then how do you explain this? So if the reason why water is less dense at a solid is because of repulsive forces, why aren't those forces at play when it's at liquid? What's happening? Right? So it forces her to now go out and investigate that a little bit more, and hopefully she will correct that misconception on her own. And if not, then I can be a little bit more direct, but it's important, I think, to have the student see the error and correct it themselves. Because I find that as you just try to, or I try to just correct it immediately, well, it's so deep in their understanding of that it's not effective, me just offering them the answer. So they have to go through the process of unlearning that if that misconception is going to be corrected. So again, I think VoiceThread creates a great opportunity for me to see the misconception and then offer that feedback in the context of whatever that demonstration of that misconception was. So that's an important piece to going through the instructional aspect. So, like I said, challenging the prevailing misconceptions is important after the instruction, or as you're going through the instruction, and then also having the information be presented by their peer or by someone else, because after a while they may stop listening to you. So having correction, having the information being explained in a different way is great. That it's not just you, the teacher, that's constantly trying to get the information across, but that you vary that and you use other avenues and the students themselves as instructional resources.
Question?
Yes.
Do you find yourself in the process of challenging, having to purge your students of a lot of bad habits? Yes. And so, do you have a particular example in mind of a bad habit? I mean, I'm finding a lot of them.
Uh-huh.
And when you challenge them, as you mentioned earlier,
Uh-huh.
they're not as reluctant, they're not as receptive to try to attempt to answer. But at the same time, challenging them sometimes seems to be offensive for them
Uh-huh.
in a larger setting.
Uh-huh.
But you do want to challenge because you don't want to give them the answer.
Right.
So, I find myself spending a lot of time trying to purge bad habits at the high school level,
Uh-huh.
which, cuts into the actual time of instruction, so to
Right.
speak, or depending on what course matter you're trying to teach, particularly
Right.
STEM.
Right, exactly. And that's actually another reason why I like the VoiceThread software or technologies that are similar to it, because it allows that conversation to happen in a more private setting.
Right.
So you're not challenging them in front of their peers, and now you're introducing that dynamic. So it allows you to safely say, hey, well, think about this. And so if you notice at the end, it was, I didn't say, now go back and fix it. It was, give me the feedback of how you reconcile this bit of information.
Right.
So it becomes more of a dialogue as opposed to, hey, I see that you're wrong and you need to fix it.
Right. I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Great question, though. And that's a delicate walk to do, because particularly in the classroom setting, you have so many social dynamics going on. And as the instructor, it is your responsibility to help correct. And so I think this is a way that this technology can help you assess, but then also correct.
I have a quick question. I wonder if there's, an obligation on our part really to teach people how to take feedback. Mm-hmm. Like if that's not a part of what this is all about, because, you're not coming down saying this is the only way to teach this topic. You're accepting feedback too. You're learning alongside the kids, so you're modeling that, and the children are also learning through working in your classroom how to gracefully, accept feedback both from teachers and peers. And I can't help but think that might be a quality that we need in adults as well. How to accept feedback. It's not criticism. It can be very helpful. And so that I think is an added benefit of running your classroom this way.
Right. And that also brings up the importance of kind of the groundwork before you get into instruction, to see what's their style, what engages them, how did they get this information, what's their experience coming in, and then creating that safe environment for them to share. And so just making sure that the climate throughout the course is one that does not involve judgment. And I think, at least I find myself explicitly having to say that throughout the course, that this is not about, me telling you you're wrong. If I make a mistake, please tell me. I invite you to point out any mistake that I make, or if you find information on your own to either add or that perhaps goes against something that I say, bring it up. So I think, like Melissa is saying, to modeling that and making sure that you are, as the instructor, very intentional about creating a safe environment, I think is absolutely important. And if you don't, it's really going to hinder your objectives as the instructor. So after the instruction, how to assess, did they actually get it? All right, and are they going to remember it? So one of the prerequisites for this is thinking about based on what they needed to be able to do by the end of the course, what opportunity can I create for them that's going to force them to demonstrate that ability? So if I'm saying by the end of this course, you need to be able to, again, going back to anatomy, physiology, you need to be able to identify and discuss the function of the muscles in the body, then how can I create an opportunity that's going to force them to do that? And so here's an example of just ways that I've done that in the past, using various technologies. Again, with the goal of having them solidify their understanding, and then also showcasing their individual capabilities. And I emphasize the individual because at this point, it is so critical that they do this on their own, because there can tend to be a reliance on the understanding of someone else, for instance, in group projects, where it's like, oh, well, I'm going to present this part, and then my classmate's going to present this part. And as it turns out, they remember whatever they presented. And so I think the final assessment or the end of topic assessment needs to be on an individual basis so that you can see, does each and every student understand the material fully? This is an example, and so for time I won't go through it, but I learned it the hard way because I allowed this group of students to demonstrate their understanding in a group. And they did a really good job. The video was great. They brought in humor. They brought in the information was accurate, very well illustrated. And in the final, I have them do a final portfolio. The student that you see here wrote in his portfolio, I did not understand the information in that video that my partner presented. And it came back and bit me at the final. And so I actually took responsibility for that because I allowed them to convince me and persuade me that no, Miss Wiley, we can do it in a group. We promise we'll both understand. That's just not how our brains work. We learn when we do it ourselves, not so much when someone else does it. So the more these opportunities to demonstrate their learning forces the individual students to do something on their own, the more accurate a picture that you're going to get of do they really get it. So another thing is that the video, having it be in a video, also allows you to see, do they get it? Because if it's in writing, if it is just an audio recording, I don't know about your students, but I have some students that are really good readers. And so they read, if I can't see them, they will read it or write it as if they have a perfect understanding. And if it's just in writing or in some type of audio format, I won't have as good an understanding of or insight into if they actually get it. But in video, I can look at you and see if you understand what you're talking about. Because it's really hard to fake understanding in person. So I encourage video productions if it's something that's going to be done outside of class. Now inside of class, then you have that feedback because they're in person and you can see that they're doing, you can see how they are explaining the information and kind of get that feedback in body language. So that's really important. So this is the last video that I'll show, and it gets to this point of having the students create something that is going to be helpful in their life or in the lives of others. So this group put together this video, and there was another part of this project where I was able to assess their individual understanding, but this was their own personal resource. And as it turns out, these students ended up creating a series of videos like this that are on the web, on YouTube, that are really good, almost like study guides. So I'll end with this.
Kaboom! Tom Bombadil, prepare to die. I'm actually the ruffian. I need a medic. Hold me down. I'm only so down. Save my teeth. Show me a medic. I catch my death. I'm only so together.
My blood may be thin, but it still runs red. Without play with this, my boy Tom would be dead. Oh, Tom would be dead. Between bloods and crypts, the thermogenetic rules basically activate or speeds up hydrogen molecules. Thermogenetic molecule.
So, like I said, these students created a series of these kind of study guide type videos. And the last little bit was an original rap, I guess, that they made to help explain the process, and was actually very helpful for other students in the class in preparing for the final and really understanding and solidifying their knowledge. So that is it. And so I hope that you've gotten a good understanding of what's important in laying the groundwork and using technology to allow students to very safely share their experiences, and using those experiences to inform your presentation of the material, using their learning styles and drawing from that in terms of activities, and then making sure that misconceptions are challenged, understandings are thorough, and then creating an opportunity for the students to demonstrate individually that they understand, and then also creating opportunities for them to bless the world with their knowledge. Any questions?
No, very good.
Thank you. This will be This will be available streaming on the web, the archive of this presentation. So if you want to share some of those handouts and with your colleagues and have them watch parts of that, they're welcome to take that in, and you can incorporate this in anything that you're doing.
All right. Thank you very much.
Great. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
You do the same.
Thank you. Love all these great resources too.
Awesome.
All right.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Take care.